First of all, I would like to say a bit of a disclaimer. I actually study management, financial management instead of economics. Probably I will not be diving too deep on international political economy and international economy as a whole, because that is just not what I master in. And I think that if I dive on too deep into it, I won't be very accurate, because that's just not what I study. But I will touch upon it for a bit. And second of all, please take everything I say with a grain of salt, because not everything I say is the truth. It is just based on my very limited research. So please, when you want to join an MUN, please do your own research and not just focus on what I'm saying. Okay, with that being said, let's move on to the next slide. Today I will be covering four main topics, which is international trade, international finance, international political economy, and also organizations and UN bodies. First of all, we will start with international trade, which is the studies of the flow of goods and services across international boundaries. This will include supply and demand factors, economic integration, international factor movements, and also policy variables such as tariffs and trade quotas. So basically, there are six instruments of trade policy. So as I established before, trade is basically the movement of goods and services between countries, right? So the movement of goods and services between countries, as you know, is called export and import. Export is when we sell our goods and services to another country, and import is when we buy goods and services from another country. So export and import is not always good for the economy of a country. There are too much import, and sometimes there are also too much export, that it becomes something called dumping, that I will be talking about later on also. So with that, the government often make regulations for international trade itself. These are a few of the regulations. The first one is tariff. Tariff is basically something like a tax that is imposed on imports, mostly imports, and also exports, and that will in itself decrease the number of import. There are two kinds of tariffs, which is specific tariff, which the government charge as a fixed cost for each unit of goods imported. So basically, fixed cost is fixed amount of money that is not in relative to the number of goods or services that is being imported. And the next is ad valorem tariff, which is collected based on the proportion of the value of imported goods. So specific is fixed cost, and ad valorem tariff is a variable cost. If you guys have learned that maybe in high school, yeah, fixed cost and variable cost in accounting. So basically, there are a few conclusions that we can imply from tariffs. So basically, tariffs are done to protect domestic producers and also government revenues. So because the imported goods and services it's taxed more, we will protect domestic producers, and also the tax can become the government revenue. And the tariff policy itself is a policy that sides with the producer and anti-customer. Why is that? Because when there are a free flow of international goods and services into our country, we as a consumer can actually pick which is the cheapest. So, for example, if I want to buy skincare from, for example, Shopee, I can choose to buy from the ones in Jakarta or the ones directly in Korea. And sometimes the ones that is directly from Korea is cheaper than the ones that is sold in Jakarta. So I can choose which is cheaper for me. But it is very anti-producer. It is very pro-producer. As if the import is being tariffed, it can increase the price of the goods and services itself. The next is subsidies. So basically, subsidies are government payments to domestic producers. It can be in the form of cash grants, lower interest loans, tax break, which is the government is offering you a reduction of your taxes, and also government participation in companies. This is done to reduce the production costs of companies and can help domestic producers compete with foreign imports and also the foreign market as a whole. And the next is import quotas, is basically a restriction of the number of goods that can be imported into a country. Usually, quota and tariffs are combined into into something called a tariff rate quota, which is basically a lower tariff rate applied to imported goods that are still within the specified quota. But if it is already above the specified quota, the imported goods are taxed more. And the next is local content requirements, which is a government requirement that some parts of the product should be produced locally. So, for example, if I want to buy shoes, for example, it is okay if the body of the shoes is imported, but the sole of the shoes should be produced locally, for example. The next is the administrative policies. It's basically a bureaucratic rule to make it more difficult for imports to enter a country. So, for example, if imports want to enter a country, it have to go through, for example, the Pemda first, and then the Pemprov, and then the Pemerintah Pusat. So it's very bureaucratic, and it is done in purpose so that it does not incentivize people to import. And the next is anti-dumping duties. So basically, dumping is selling a goods on foreign market below their cost of production, or selling goods on foreign market below their fair market value. So basically, selling goods on foreign market for cheaper price. This policy will certainly kill domestic business that have higher prices or fair prices. Maybe you guys have heard about the issue of Mr. Hu recently and Shopee that is considered dumping. And for that, the government used an anti-dumping policy, which is a policy designed to punish foreign companies that is involved in dumping practices. Next. Okay, so as I mentioned before, there is a good and bad in both import and export, right? So what should the government do? Should it intervene, or should it just let the free trade take place? So there are multiple arguments for both intervention and also free trade. This can be adjusted to your specific countries in your specific MUN, right? So for example, if you are pro-intervention, usually countries that have a more socialist policy, socialist government, sorry, uh, you can give two sides of argument, which is political argument and also economic argument. So the political argument is usually, protecting jobs, national securities, protecting consumers, furthering foreign policy objectives. But what I would like to touch upon is basically the economic argument. There are two general economic argument, which is the infant industry argument and the strategic trade policy. So infant and industry argument is basically where government should temporarily support new industries until they have grown strong enough to meet international competition. This is very critical because of two main reasons. First is the protection of manufacturing from foreign competition, that the producer or the manufacturing itself is not ready yet. And the second is it relies on assumption that firms are unable to make efficient long-term investment yet. So basically, because the industry is still new, it still needs protection from the government. And the second is the strategic trade policy, which have two components. Is basically a government can help raise national income if it can assure that firms can gain a first mover advantage. And the second is it might pay a government to intervene in an industry by helping domestic firms overcome the barriers to entry, because then it will yield more results in terms of taxes and also other government incomes, so that it incentivizes the government to make the intervention. And the second is the government is the argument for free trade. So basically, a strategic trade policy that is established to incentivize and to help domestic firms is a bigger than neighbor policy. So what a bigger than neighbor policy is basically you boost your national income, but it is at the expense of other countries. So because your national income is increasing, the other countries uh, will be um, will be dirugikan lah ya. And the other countries that is dirugikan will probably provoke retaliation, which is that they will make policies that is in retaliation or melawan your policies. Okay, so the next is domestic policies. So basically, government does not always act in the national interest when they intervene in the economy. Sometimes political groups, interest groups, or maybe even companies also influence them. So that is also something that you should take into account when making an argument for free trade. That is not necessarily wrong or necessarily bad because sometimes when government is help or is have an agreement with private parties, it can also leads to things such as development, and maybe you guys have heard public-private partnership. One of them is maybe the prasyarat is for the government to intervene, but you should always keep that in mind. Okay, next. Next is the World Trade Organization. So basically, the World Trade Organization is the only global international organization that deals with rules of trade between nations. So basically, the primary purpose of the WTO is open trade for the benefit of all countries. Next. Okay, so here are a few functions and also the trade principles of WTO. So the function of the WTO is highlighted into two main functions and a few additional functions. So the two main function is to oversee the implementation, administration, and operation of the covered agreements. This can include bilateral or multilateral agreement or the WTO agreement as a whole. And also it provides a forum for negotiation and settling disputes of trade between countries. And there are a few additional duties. The first is to review and propagate a national trade policy in order for it to be coherent with the international trade policy and the global economy condition. And the second is the second priority of the WTO is to assist the developing, least developing, and low income countries in transition to adjust to the WTO rules and also international trade agreements and rules. And in order to achieve greater coherence in global economy itself, the WTO also works together with the IMF, the World Bank, and other affiliated agencies. And the WTO itself have five trade principles, which is non-discrimination, reciprocity, binding and enforceable commitments, transparency, and safety values. And there are also three provisions in the WTO articles itself. The first is to allow use of trade measures to attain non-economic objective, such as, for example, social objective and also sustainable development. And the second is articles aim at ensuring fair competition. So as I mentioned before, the main goal of international economy, international trade is for it to be fair competition. So we don't do dumping. Well, technically we do, but it's frowned upon. But the end goal is the fair competition itself. And the third is provisions permitting intervention in trade for economic reasons. So, for example, if two governments already sign an agreement of trade, but for example, Indonesia and China, but Indonesia suddenly went into economic crisis. So the government can do an intervention. The government of Indonesia can do an intervention of the trade agreement due to that economic crisis. Next. Okay, so here are basically the structure of the WTO. that consists of the General Council and also the Ministerial Conference. Maybe later the TND team will share my PowerPoint so that you guys can read upon it further. And these are a few things that the WTO can cover that includes goods, services, intellectual property, dispute settlement, etc. Okay, next. Okay, so another trade organization that you often meet in an MUN is the UNCTAD. It's basically part of the UN Secretariat that deals with trade, investment, and development issues. So the main goal is maximize the trade, investment, and development opportunities of developing countries and assist them in efforts to integrate into the world economy. And it is the UNCTAD also aims to formulate policies relating to all aspects of development, including trade, aid, transport, finance, and technology. Next. Okay, so this is the international finance and global financial system. So international finance is basically the studies of, hold on, wait, I think I forgot to change it. But the international finance is the studies of flow of capital across international financial markets and the economy as a whole. Wait, next, okay. The international finance, which is also referred to as international monetary economics or international macroeconomics, is the branch of financial economics that is broadly concerned with monetary and macroeconomic interrelations between two or more countries. So the keywords here is monetary and macroeconomic interrelations between two or more countries. And it examines the dynamics of global financial system, international monetary system, balance of payment, exchange rate, FDI, and how these topics relate to international trade that I have mentioned before. So in later chapters, I will touch upon the global financial system, international monetary system, balance of payment, exchange rate. However, I would first briefly touch upon the foreign direct investment. It's basically an investment from another country into your country. So that's about it for foreign direct investment. Because foreign direct investment is actually a very broad topic, and I would just touch upon the surface of FDI for today. Next. Okay, so this is the international monetary system. So basically, the international monetary system is a set of internationally agreed rules or conventions, and also supporting institution that facilitates international trade, cross-border investment, and generally the reallocation of capital between nation states. So basically, I would briefly touch upon the history of the international monetary system itself. So after the World War II, uh, the Allied countries, as you know, that wins the World War II, all 44 of the Allied nations came together in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. So basically, Bretton Woods is like a daerah in New Hampshire in the U.S. In order to regulate international monetary and financial order. So basically, the main point of the Bretton Woods Conference is tying currencies to gold. So basically, for example, $1 should have like 0 point something something grams of gold that is tied into it. So if a country, for example, have so for example, if 1 gram of gold is $100, this is oversimplification, yeah, by the way. And the countries have like the whole country only have like $100. It should have 1 gram of gold in reserve. So if a country have like for example $100 trillion in circulation, it should have like 1 trillion grams of gold in its reserve gitu ya. Jadi pokoknya satu unit uang itu harus punya satu unit emas in the reserve bank of the country. Kayak gitu intinya. BTW ini so sorry if I agak campur-campur karena I think that it will convey my points better if I explain some things in Indonesian. Okay, anyway, so the Bretton Woods Conference doesn't last long. It is ended by the something called the Washington Consensus in 1989. Even though it is the term Washington Consensus is coined in 1989, sebenarnya Bretton Woods system ini already collapsed way back in the 1970s. So one of the key events being President Nixon. So President Nixon is the president of the United States pada masa itu. He actually suspends the dollar convertibility into gold in 1971. So this renders the dollar to be a fiat currency. Basically, a fiat currency is a currency that have no backings of any kind of asset gitu ya. Nah, but there are many ideas from the international bodies to make the next international monetary system. There are flexible exchange rates, special drawing right standards, gold standards, and also the Delhi Declaration. Next. Okay, now I will touch upon exchange rate. Kan dia tadi udah dibahas nih, sebenarnya exchange rate itu apa sih gitu kan. In finance, an exchange rate is a rate which one national currency will be exchanged for another. Nah, exchange rate ini sendiri, there are many factors affecting exchange rate. Here I would like to touch upon 6 of them, which is the balance of payment, interest rate level, inflation, policies and government intervention, venture capital and speculators, and also the economic strength of a country. So basically, balance of payment is the difference between all money flowing into the country and all money flowing out of the country. So if the money flowing into the country is like 100 and the money flowing out is 110, so the balance of payment is in deficit for $10 gitu ya. Nah, the next is interest level. It's basically bunga lah ya, cost of borrowing capital gitu. Nah, when a country raises its interest rate higher than the foreign interest rate, it will cause capital inflow. Iya dong, kalau sebuah negara punya bunga yang lebih gede dibandingkan negara lain, orang-orang di negara lain nggak mungkin mau untuk nabung di negara mereka kan, pasti nyari interest rate yang paling gede dong, ya kan? It will cause capital inflow yang akan increase the demand for that domestic currency, gitu hubungannya. And then there is an inflation factor, which is basically how much. So basically, it is in relations with purchasing power. So purchasing power is basically how much a certain number of money can buy. So for example, like 10 years ago, bakso mungkin harganya kayak 10.000 gitu kan. Sekarang mungkin udah jadi 15.000 gitu kan. Jadi sebenarnya 10.000 sekarang itu purchasing power-nya nggak sama kayak 10.000 10 tahun lalu gitu. Karena ada yang namanya inflation atau kenaikan nilai mata uang kayak gitu. Nah, if the inflation or the kan tadi gue bilang kalau inflation itu kenaikan nilai mata uang ya. Kalau nilai mata uangnya terus naik, terus habis itu foreign currency-nya misalkan nggak apa namanya ya, kalau foreign currency misalkan sama aja gitu ya, the currencies of the countries with high inflation will depreciate against those with low inflation gitu. Terus ada fiscal and monetary policy and also government market intervention. Jadi jadi bedanya fiscal sama monetary policy. Fiscal policy itu have something to do with government spending or government income gitu ya. Sementara monetary policy itu have something to do with the number of money that is circulating kayak gitu. Nah ini bakal ngefek banget ke exchange rate. Sama aja kayak government market intervention. If misalkan waktu tahun sebelum Pak Harto lungsur gitu ya, dia pakai namanya fixed exchange rate, di mana $1 itu kalau nggak salah 2.000 deh, but please check me up on that. Nah itu kalau kayak gitu, itu namanya ada government intervention, di mana $1 itu di set gitu sebagai 2.000 dan itu akan menghancurkan exchange rate kita in the long run, which happens in 1998 kan, tiba-tiba dari 2.000 jadi 16.000 kalau nggak salah gitu kan. Jadi it very much affects the exchange rate. Nah, terus habis itu ada venture capital and speculators. So basically, if speculators expect a certain currency to appreciate, mereka kan bakal beli nih large amount of currency. This will cause the exchange rate of the currency to rise, kayak gitu. And vice versa also happens ya. Terus economic strength of a country. In general, a high economic strength of a country are not are not literally conducive to the local currency itself. Tapi kalau kita punya ekonomi yang kuat, biasanya currency kita atau exchange rate kita itu lebih stable. So for example US kan, oke, enggak US deh, karena US kan jadi perbandingan. Jepang deh, or the European Union with Euro gitu. They're quite stable kan ekonominya. Jadi their currency or exchange rate is also quite stable kayak gitu. Next. Okay, so we will touch upon briefly on the global financial system. It is basically a worldwide framework. Jadi framework ini terdiri dari banyak hal gitu ya. Yang pertama legal agreement, institution, terus economic actors yang bersama-sama bisa memfasilitasi international flows of financial capital for the purpose of either investment atau trade financing gitu ya. Nah, makin ke sini, the global financial system is edging toward greater stability, di mana global financial system as a whole itu makin interconnected antar negara, terus juga ini kita ngomongin pre-COVID ya, COVID mah udah nggak usah ditanya lagi, tapi kita ngomongin pre-COVID, global financial system itu quite stable ya sejak tahun 2008 gitu, jadi fluktuasinya nggak terlalu gede. Nah, tapi karena jadi stable itu, para government ini have to deal with different regional or national needs nih, karena makin interconnected kan. Jadi sekarang Indonesia's financial system nggak sepenuhnya depends on Indonesia itself, tapi bisa juga depends on other countries. Nah, implikasinya apa sih? Implicationnya, it also affects the balance of payments of countries and also the systematic risk. Jadi gini, risk atau resiko itu generally ada dua. Yang pertama systematic risk, yang kedua unsystematic risk. Jadi bedanya apa? Kalau unsystematic risk itu dia cuma ngefek ke one types of asset or one country. Sementara systematic risk itu affecting all gitu ya. And with the global financial system being intertwined like it is now, the systematic risk automatically increase. This can be seen with the COVID-19 pandemic gitu ya. If it is the 1920 Spanish flu, for example, the economic repercussion will not be as bad as it is today because the economy back then is not globally interconnected. So, for example, if there is an outbreak in China, it will not directly affect, like for example, Indonesia or the US. But because of the global financial system being interconnected, the systematic risk of the global financial itself is rising by the day, gitu. And sebenarnya global financial system ini participants-nya siapa aja sih? There are three general participants of the global financial system. First is the economic actors, the second is the regulatory bodies, and also the third is the research organizations and other forms of our associations. So for example, economic actors is basically consumers and also producers, and regulatory bodies is basically governments, and research organizations and other forms of associations is, for example, the World Economic Forum gitu, for example. It is also have an effect on the global financial system itself. So if you guys want to know, or if you guys have an MUN with the topic of the global financial system, or for example the economic impact of COVID-19 gitu ya, for example, you guys have to understand these participants of the global economy and how we can help these participants to stabilize the global financial system back to pre-COVID lah ya, in the case of economic impact of COVID-19. Next. Okay, so this is international political economy. as I mentioned before, I will not be touching upon it very deeply because this is not my area of expertise dan gue agak takut salah aja kalau gue terlalu banyak menjabarkan di sini. So, international political economy itself, also known as global political economy, is basically an interdisciplinary academic discipline that analyzes economics, politics, and also international relations and how they relate to each other. Jadi political economy itself comes from the Greek word polis, which means city or state, and oikonomos, or mungkin kalian udah belajar juga pas SMA ya, oikonomos is apa namanya asal katanya dari ekonomi gitu ya, meaning one who manage a whole household or estate gitu ya. Jadi political economy itself is the study of how a country, which is the public's household, is managed or governed, taking into account both political and economic factor, and also in this case, an international relations factor. Okay, next. Okay, this is the international organizations and UN bodies that maybe you guys will meet in your future MUMs. Next. First is the IMF. Jadi IMF itu sebenarnya is an organization gitu ya, international financial institution, which works to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, and promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, as well as reducing poverty around the world. So sistemnya di IMF itu countries contribute funds to a pool through a quota system. Jadi masing-masing negara itu udah diallocate kuotanya masing-masing seberapa besar kontribusi mereka terhadap IMF. Di IMF sendiri yang paling besar kontribusinya itu ya as you might have guessed US, which is 16% kalau nggak salah last I check. Meanwhile the Indonesia itu di bawah 1% for perbandingan gitu ya. And then later on, after the countries already pull the funds needed through the quota systems that I previously mentioned, the countries can then borrow the money when they are experiencing balance of payment problems. So, for example, if they have a trade deficit gitu ya, trade deficit itu kalau gue boleh recall tadi adalah ketika capital atau cash outflow-nya lebih besar dibandingkan cash inflow, kayak gitu. Next. Nah, ini adalah temannya dari IMF, which is World Bank. It is also an international financial institution that provide loans and grants to governments, focusing primarily on the governments of low and middle income countries for the purpose of pursuing capital projects. Jadi World Bank Group sendiri itu terdiri dari banyak institution. The main two institution is IBRD and also IDA. But there are also three other institutions, which is the IFC, the MIGA, and also the ICSID. Next. Okay, maybe some of you are wondering sebenarnya bedanya apa sih antara World Bank sama IMF? Karena biasanya mereka interchangeable kan, tapi sebenarnya tuh enggak. Jadi kalau World Bank Group sendiri, they focus more on developing countries, and their focus is to reduce poverty and increase shared prosperity. Sementara kalau IMF itu fokusnya lebih ke stabilizing the international monetary system and also act as a monitor of the world's currencies gitu ya. Jadi dia lebih fokus ke financial systemnya itself. Sementara World Bank itu lebih fokus ke poverty sama development dan increasing prosperity gitu ya. Nah, kalau World Bank sendiri dia accomplish its goals through technical and financial support that enables country to implement specific projects gitu ya. Jadi dia fokusnya tuh lebih ke project. Jadi loan-nya itu buat project, misalkan building health center atau making clean water available. Nah, sementara kalau IMF itself, dia main ini juga loan gitu ya. Tapi kalau kita dipinjemin uang sama IMF, in return we have to fix our macroeconomic policy. That's why Indonesia waktu itu sempat agak bermasalah kan sama IMF. Gara-gara kita pinjam uang IMF pas krisis 1998. Tapi IMF itu mengharuskan kita to change our macroeconomic policy as a whole, and therefore karena ada permasalahan di situ, jadinya nggak efektif juga macroeconomic policy yang direkomendasikan oleh IMF. Itu juga salah satu kritiknya IMF gitu ya, bahwa mereka itu kadang-kadang suka nggak ngelihat negara yang mereka pinjemin gitu, nggak ngelihat konteks makanya kadang-kadang suka gagal gitu loan-nya. Nah, tapi IMF sendiri kuncinya adalah dia lebih fokus ke policy-nya, membenarkan sistemnya, dan juga pokoknya monetary systemnya lah gitu. Sementara kalau World Bank tadi lebih fokus ke reducing poverty dan increasing prosperity kayak gitu. Next. Oke, ini adalah ECOSOC. So, sorry harusnya. No. Beda. Oke. Jadi, sorry itu gue agak salah. Jadi, ECOSOC itself itu adalah one of the six main committees of the United Nations General Assembly. Sorry, no. Hold on, bentar. Kok gue salah? Oke. Sorry. Jadi, ECOSOC itself is the one of the six bodies of the United Nations. Jadi six bodies of the United Nations itu selain ECOSOC itu juga includes things like UNSC and also the General Assembly itself. Nah, dia itu serves as the central forum for discussing international economic and social issues gitu ya. Nah, dia itu juga mengkoordinasikan tiga hal gitu, which is the commissions, the committees, and also the specialized agencies. Jadi commissions yang diregulate sama ECOSOC itu includes mungkin kalau kalian pernah dengar UNCSW, Commission on the Status of Women, CCPCJ, Commission on the Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. Terus juga dulu ada UN Commission on Human Rights yang terus diganti jadi UNHRC sekarang. Terus juga dia juga mengkoordinasikan regional commissions such as UN Economic Commission for Europe, for Africa, for Latin America and Caribbean, etc. lah. Nah, terus habis itu dia ada committees and other UN bodies, which includes things like mungkin yang kalian pernah dengar itu ada High Level Committee on Programs atau HLCP, terus juga ada Group of Experts on Geographical Names, which is technically expert bodies gitu ya, itu di coordinate semua sama ECOSOC. Nah, terus habis itu specialized agencies nih. Specialized agencies ini yang biasanya mungkin kalian sering banget dengar gitu ya. Kayak FAO, terus International Civil Aviation and Organization atau ICAO, terus habis itu ILO, terus even IMF and World Bank gitu. Jadi itu semua dikoordinasikan sama ECOSOC gitu. Nah, terus ini kayak tadi ada gue agak ke unscramble dikit. So after this harusnya ada ECOFIN. Jadi ECOFIN itu apa? ECOFIN itu ini yang General Assembly Second Committee gitu ya. Kalau tadi ECOSOC itu fokus, jadi gini, ECOSOC itu another UN body, sementara ECOFIN itu adalah part of the General Assembly yang regulates economic and financial issues. Kayak gitu. Dia deals with global finance and economic matters gitu ya. Terus habis itu basically kalau ECOFIN sendiri dia itu punya beberapa mandate. Banyak sih sebenarnya mandate-nya ECOFIN. Jadi ECOFIN itu sendiri punya sekitar 11 mandate if I'm not mistaken. Few of them yang paling mungkin akan kalian temukan gitu ya di MUN kalian itu the mandate in regards to sustainable development and also macroeconomic policies and also how to finance development itself gitu ya. Jadi walaupun kita semua pasti mau gitu ya terus-terusan aim for development, however kan harus ada yang nge-finance gitu. And also the eradication of poverty. Itu mungkin beberapa yang bakal kalian sering temui gitu ya, mandate-nya ECOFIN di MUN kalian. And also the ECOFIN itu karena dia UNGA, dia komitinya terus-terusan bersamaan dengan UNGA lain gitu ya. Jadi sekarang udah ada 75 session of ECOFIN meeting. And tahun ini the 75th session fokusnya itu adalah sustain economic growth and sustainable development. Karena kita kan harusnya on track to achieve the 2030 sustainable development goals ya gitu. Nah, sama kayak Kosok tadi, ada beberapa reporting bodies yang harus report ke ECOFIN. Few of them includes UNEP, terus habis itu Convention on Biological Diversity atau CBD, terus habis itu juga UNFCCC atau Framework Convention on Climate Change. Itu mereka harus report to the ECOFIN itself, baru nanti ECOFIN yang report ke General Assembly. Kayak gitu. Next. Oke, kayaknya sekian dulu dari gue. Apologies for my mistakes dari tadi gue yang menjelaskan. Kalau ada yang mungkin belum jelas, boleh banget langsung ditanya aja. Atau kalau mau nanya tentang something yang lain, misalkan kayak financing for your resolutions dan lain-lain, itu boleh juga. Giving the floor back to TND for the question and answer.
Thank you, Dias. So, all right, we've just got a really good explanation about how free trade and interventionism differs, about how WTO works, about global financial system, how politics and economy intertwine, and on international financial institutions like IMF, World Bank, and so on. Now we have quite amount of time for Q&A before buka. So if there's any question, like Dias have stated, if you get any points that are not clear enough, or ada yang mau kalian tanyain soal solution implementation, like how do you find financing, or how do you fund your solution, feel free to ask away.
Kak, can I ask, but in bahasa boleh gak?
Boleh.
Oke, halo Kak Dias, thank you so much for the penjelasan. Jadi aku penasaran tuh, ini kalau misalnya MUN kan suka kayak nyari tentang funding mechanism-nya kan. Terus tadi kakak jelasin juga ada World Bank sama IMF gitu kan. Nah, itu tuh ada gak sih do and don'ts-nya yang kayak kadang-kadang tuh bisa pakai World Bank atau kadang-kadang tuh nggak bisa, World Bank tuh nggak bisa ikut campur gitu, itu bukan mandate-nya. Itu aku masih bingung sih Kak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you Alisa for the question. So basically, as I stated before, mungkin yang harus kamu pikirin baik-baik adalah the purpose of your council gitu ya. Kalau misalkan council kamu misalkan UNDP ngomongin SDG 1 no poverty gitu ya. Nah, itu of course you have to choose World Bank gitu kan. Karena tadi as I mentioned before, one of the focus of World Bank is reducing poverty itself. In that case, you shouldn't choose IMF because there is nothing wrong with your country's financial system gitu. Nah, sementara kalau kamu milih councilnya misalkan US US Cabinet on 2008 misalkan kayak gitu. Itu kamu pilihnya ya IMF gitu atau Suharto Kabinet deh gitu. Itu ya kamu pilihnya IMF. Kayak gitu aja sih kurang lebih. Kalau buat do's and don'ts-nya sebenarnya ya please bear in mind that ada syarat-syaratnya gitu untuk dipinjemin sama World Bank dan IMF. And if your country nggak sanggup untuk memenuhi syarat-syarat tersebut, mendingan lu nggak usah propose itu. Karena that will be against your mandate gitu. Karena by the end of the day in MUN kan lo harus keep in mind your sovereignty of your country gitu kan. And your interest gitu. I hope that answers ya.
Oke, boleh tambah dikit nggak Kak? Jadi kalau misalnya kayak UNICEF ada mau ngadain program gitu, sebenarnya mereka bisa gitu ngajuin ke World Bank, tapi kayak balik lagi ke country-nya masing-masing memenuhi syarat atau enggak gitu ya jadi.
Kalau aku sih I highly recommend using the word recommend in your draft resolution. Karena kalau recommend kan itu nggak imposing sama sekali ya. Itu suka-suka negara ya lah mau ngapain gitu. Jadi recommend financing mechanism programs such as but not limited to working together with World Bank gitu misalkan. Kayak gitu.
Oke, thank you so much, Kak.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Alisa, for raising a question. Is there anyone else who would like to raise a question?
Kak, aku mau nanya dong, Kak.
Boleh.
Sebelumnya, I would like to thank you for the presentation. It was really amazing.
Thank you.
It is easier to understand, especially for me as a beginner in MUN, and especially in this MUN club in UEM Moon Club. I would like to ask a question, tapi pakai bahasa Indonesia aja ya, Kak ya?
Nggak apa.
Agak grogi, maaf ya, Kak.
Nggak apa.
Oke, ya. Jadi gini, Kak. Kalau tadi kan Kakak sempat membahas juga ya untuk menjawab pertanyaan sebelumnya soal Soeharto kabinet ya tentang itu apa ntar pilih council-nya kayak World Bank aja untuk mengurangi poverty. Tapi kalau World Bank itu juga ada ini nggak sih Kak kayak peraturan kayak kan kalau misalnya buat ngurangin poverty itu kan juga perlu pinjaman ya Kak ya, pinjaman yang cukup besar. Kalau negaranya itu yang kita dapat itu kayak mungkin kurang gitu Kak, kayak APBN-nya kurang gitu untuk memenuhi kriteria minjem ya kan loan gitu dari World Bank, itu baik pilih council yang mana Kak ya?
Oke. Sebelumnya gue izin buka sebentar ya. Nggak
Yes,
apa nggak?
it's okay.
Oke.
We're going to have a short break to
Okay.
accommodate buat yang buka. Okay. Feel free.
Oke. Oke. Ini jawabnya habis break aja kali ya. Kita break sampai jam 6 dulu maybe. Atau gimana?
Boleh Kak, nggak apa-apa Kak.
Oke, ya udah.
Break aja dulu.
Yeah, we're going to have a break until 6, I think. Yeah, that's
Okay.
possible.
Oke. See you after break. Kafka nanti aku jawab habis break ya.
Okay. Okay. You're back. All right. Since it's already 6, let's continue with the Q&A. So, yes, have you already ready to answer the question?
Yes.
Cool.
Jadi, oke. Jadi sebenarnya kalau syarat in terms of kayak misalkan GDP or those kind of things, the World Bank doesn't have that because karena kan tujuannya adalah reducing poverty sama increasing prosperity kan. If they like impose syarat that cap the GDP, the minimum GDP, it will be against their tujuan lah ya. Jadi sebenarnya sih kalau dari segi yang kayak gitu-gitunya nggak ada. However, there are few criticisms of the World Bank dalam hal sebenarnya banyak sih, tapi few of them is yang pertama adalah governance-nya. Jadi walaupun World Bank ini represent like sedunia gitu ya, namanya juga World Bank gitu kan. It is run by a small number of economically powerful countries. So for example, if your country tipe-tipe yang kayak skeptis gitu ya sama negara-negara superpower, itu personally I would not recommend you to propose a solution with World Bank. Tapi then again, it can be like a middle ground for discussion gitu ya. Misalkan kayak lu sebenarnya nggak setuju nih untuk pakai World Bank, tapi the other delegates want to use World Bank, itu bisa kamu jadiin chip for negotiation gitu. Oke, nggak apa-apa deh, gue ikhlas pakai World Bank, tapi lu harus apa gitu misalkan kan gitu kan, negotiation is give and take gitu kan. Jadi itu bisa jadi salah satu poin justru buat kamu negotiate gitu. Nah terus habis itu sebenarnya World Bank itu agak mirip-mirip juga sama IMF di mana dia itu ada namanya structural adjustment policies gitu on poor countries. Jadi misalkan kalau tadi IMF kan lebih ke financial systemnya. Nah kalau ini dari strukturnya gitu yang membuat jadi apa ya, the poverty itself itu makin gitu ya. Misalkan kayak education policies-nya dari sebuah negara gitu yang membuat poverty cycle of poverty-nya tuh nggak putus gitu. Nah, World Bank itu juga dia sama kayak IMF di mana dia mengimpose sebuah structural adjustment policies di mana sometimes it's not exactly right gitu ya, not exactly tepat, especially seperti yang gue bilang tadi, World Bank itu governed by superpower countries, sementara targetnya adalah low income countries gitu ya, they just don't see eye to eye kayak gitu. Sebenarnya banyak juga sih apa namanya kritisismnya di mana salah satunya juga World Bank itu dia lebih pro free trade ekonomi gitu ya, pro privatization juga, karena pada akhirnya goalnya dia adalah pokoknya semuanya prosper gitu kan, mau lu pakai uang negara mau lu pakai uang swasta suka-suka, yang penting pada akhirnya semua orang prosper. Tapi kan nggak semua negara bisa digituin ya, kadang-kadang ada negara yang memang negaranya government yang butuh gitu kan, kayak gitu. Jadi kalau negara kamu misalkan nggak terlalu setuju sama konsep free trade, itu juga don't use World Bank gitu. Gitu sih kurang lebih.
Iya Kak, aku juga mau nambahin aja dari jawaban Kakak. Tadi jawabannya udah jelas banget, cuma aku mau nambahin aja kayak yang tadi Kakak bilang, misalnya ada beberapa negara yang memang dia itu nggak setuju, nggak pro sama free trade. Mungkin kayak Korea Utara gitu ya Kak ya, mungkin North Korea gitu kan. Atau tadi aku mau ajuin itu, misalnya aku dapat negara kayak contohnya Haiti. Haiti itu kan bisa dibilang negara yang GDP-nya kurang. Aku nggak mau bilang kurang sih, pokoknya ya
kurang sih.
Kemudian juga pendapat kapitanya ya di bawah juga. Kemudian juga gininya dia jauh dari angka 0 gitu kan Kak ya. Dia jadi ya ekonominya timpang. Nah, ya jadi pertanyaan aku di situ Kak. Jadi kalau itu aku dapat negara yang seperti itu, aku lebih pilihnya tetap aku maksudnya disaranin lebih pilihnya World Bank aja gitu ya Kak, jangan IMF gitu. IMF maksudnya gitu ya Kak.
Iya, kalau World Bank atau IMF World Bank sih. Cuman kalau bisa cari funding mechanism yang lain sih. Sebenarnya funding mechanism itu kan banyak banget ya, nggak harus World Bank atau IMF. Salah satu caranya bisa yang mungkin bisa kamu consider adalah public private partnership. di mana public-private partnership itu adalah lu kerjasama sama pihak swasta di negara lu. Tapi kan pada akhirnya karena itu di negara lu akan tetap bisa ngepajakin kan, which means a win-win anyway for your government gitu kan. Selain lu dapet development-nya, lu juga bisa dapet duit dari pajaknya, kayak gitu. Jadi you can consider other funding mechanisms aside from World Bank or IMF, kayak gitu.
Oh, oke, Kak. Terima kasih banyak ya Kak Dias ya.
Yeah,
Ngejawab banget.
sama-sama. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kafka, for asking the question. Is there any other person? I think Amara Beatrice, do you want to raise question?
Yes, Kak, I would like to ask a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Jadi kan tadi sempat ngomongin tentang sebenarnya funding mechanisms itu bisa macam-macam. Terus tadi kakak tadi ada ngomong masalah partnership. Tapi aku mau nanya, kan kalau misalnya di MUN kita itu bikin kayak blok-blok di mana mungkin misalnya aja nih, oh ini isinya blok itu negara-negara berkembang, tapi sebenarnya situation satu negara berkembang sama negara berkembang lain itu kan pasti beda-beda. Ideally kalau misalnya dalam keadaan kayak gitu, gimana kita cara nulis draft resolution atau working paper yang yang funding mechanism-nya itu masuk akal, misal kita nggak sanggup World Bank, kita nggak sanggup IMF, jadi kita mau nyari yang lain. Tapi kondisi kita beda-beda nih, jadi kayak how do we ideally write it down?
Oke. Amara apa Beatrice? Bagaimana?
Amara, Kak.
Oke, Amara, gue mau nanya, lu butuh jawaban cepet apa jawaban idealis? Beda soalnya.
That's an interesting question.
Beda
Jawaban
soalnya.
idealisnya panjang banget nggak?
Enggak sih, kalau jawaban
Okay,
idealisnya
then.
sebenarnya sesuaiin aja sama country stance kamu gitu. Misalkan caranya adalah kamu bisa ngelihat what your country previously do atau what your country usually do gitu. Misalkan ada juga kan negara-negara kayak Indonesia gitu, dia tuh lebih rely on bilateral lending gitu ya, dia minjem dari misalkan China for example. Kamu bisa lihat sejarahnya country kamu biasanya lebih prefer mana, dan pas nego itu kamu push, itu yang kamu push. Nanti misalkan kamu udah dapet nih, oke misalkan kamu Indonesia gitu ya, terus Indonesia biasanya pakai bilateral nih, apa aja sih advantage-nya bilateral dibandingkan World Bank, dibandingkan IMF, dibandingkan PPP gitu misalkan. Nah, nanti pas negotiation, pas argument building, kamu push-nya itu bilateral aja. Tapi kalau kamu mau jawaban cepet, sama kayak yang tadi gue bilang, lu tulis aja recommend, karena recommend itu tidak impose anything gitu kan. Dan itu ya easy way out lah. Itu bisa di mana negara kamu not necessarily, misalkan kamu tadi Haiti ya, kayak Kafka gitu, nggak sanggup nih lu bayar ke World Bank, tapi kan recommend doang, doesn't mean your government have to take it gitu. Itu jawaban singkat dan jawaban idealisnya. Terus habis itu juga bisa cek funding mechanism yang udah ada di organisasinya. Misalkan kamu FAO nih, FAO itu dia punya kayak reserve fund-nya juga, atau UNICEF gitu misalkan. Dia punya reserve fund sendiri gitu di luar World Bank, IMF dan kawan-kawannya lah gitu. Jadi itu juga bisa jadi alternatif funding mechanism yang mungkin bisa kamu pakai.
Jadi sebenarnya yang intinya itu kita tetap harus ngelihat country kita itu sebenarnya gimana sih, dan kita kalau misalnya mengusul itu ya harus berdasarkan stance itu. Habis itu ngelihat council kita itu sebenarnya punya budget, terus buat apa aja gitu kali ya budgetnya, dan is it possible to take some from it gitu ya?
Yes, betul.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kak.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Is there anyone else who would like to raise a question? All right, I think that's none. Okay, I also like to remind before we close the session to fill the present form as well, to make sure that you're present absensi kalian tercatat dengan baik. Terus habis itu I just got an information that we're going to do a photo session first. So if it's possible, please turn on your camera so we can do the documentation. Okay. All right. Theo, who's going to do the photo session? Is it me?
I can take a picture of it.
Okay. Okay, Diaz already give you your her contact as well if you got further questions, so you can contact her directly. Okay, Theo, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm taking the screenshot in 3, 2, 1. Done. Okay, thank you everyone.
Okay, thank you, Sandra,
Thank
for the
you.
picture. Okay, thank you everyone for coming to today's general training. Please do look forward to our future training. Thank you and have a good day. Thank you, Diaz, for filling in
Thank
as
you,
well.
Andy.
Thank you,
Thank
Kak.
you, guys.
Terima kasih.
Thank you.